You are disappearing, not literally, but psychologically fading into the background of other people's consciousness, becoming the human equivalent of wallpaper. Every day you walk through rooms where no one truly sees you, speak words that carry no weight, exist in spaces where your absence wouldn't even register. You've become so agreeable, so predictable, so forgettable that you've achieved something worse than hatred. You've achieved indifference, and indifference is the only unforgivable sin in the theater of human attention. Think about the last time someone genuinely listened when you spoke. Not the polite nodding, not the empty while they scrolled through their phone, but the kind of attention that stops time, that makes your words matter. When was it? Can you even remember? You've been so busy making yourself palatable, so desperate to avoid conflict, so committed to being liked, that you've made yourself irrelevant. You've trained everyone around you to treat you like ambient noise, present but meaningless. The cruel irony is that in your attempt to be loved by everyone, you've made yourself impossible to love by anyone. Love requires substance, requires something solid to grasp onto. But you've made yourself so smooth, so agreeable, so devoid of sharp edges, that there's nothing left to hold. You slip through people's fingers like water, leaving no impression, creating no memory, generating no longing when you're gone. You've become the person others think of, only when they need something, never when they want something. Machiavelli understood what you've forgotten, that humans exist in a brutal hierarchy of psychological impact. At the top are those who command fear, not through cruelty, but through the sheer force of their presence, their unpredictability, their refusal to be taken for granted. These people create consequences. Cross them, ignore them, disrespect them, and something shifts. Not necessarily something violent or dramatic, but something unmistakable. They withdraw their light, their energy, their goodwill, and suddenly the room feels different. They've taught the world that their presence has value because their absence has weight. Next in this hierarchy are those who inspire love, not the desperate, clinging love of the needy, but the earned devotion of those who recognize rare value when they see it. These people have made themselves worth loving through scarcity, through depth, through the kind of selective vulnerability that makes intimacy feel like a privilege rather than a given. They don't love everyone, so being loved by them means something. They don't give themselves away freely, so receiving their attention feels like winning a prize. But at the bottom of this hierarchy, drowning in irrelevance, are those who generate neither fear nor love, but something infinitely worse. Nothing, no emotional response, no psychological footprint, no lingering thoughts. You've been taught that being harmless is virtuous, that blending in is safe, that asking for nothing means you'll never be disappointed. But you've discovered the terrible cost of this philosophy: complete erasure from the consciousness of others. You exist in their peripheral vision, noticed only when you're useful, remembered only when they need something you can provide. Your niceness has become your prison. Every time you smile when you want to frown, every time you agree when you want to argue, every time you stay quiet when you want to speak, you're adding another bar to your cage. You've confused being kind with being weak, being agreeable with being forgettable, being supportive with being disposable. The people around you have learned they can interrupt you mid-sentence, make plans without consulting you, ignore your opinions, overlook your contributions, and dismiss your needs because you've never given them a reason to do otherwise. You've trained them, like a dog trainer, rewarding good behavior. You've rewarded their disrespect with your continued presence, their neglect with your unwavering availability, their indifference with your desperate attempts to please. You've taught them that you have no breaking point, no moment where you'll finally say enough, no line that can't be crossed without consequence. Your kindness without boundaries isn't virtue, it's invisibility disguised as moral superiority. Think about the last time you said no to someone and meant it. Not the apologetic, guilt-ridden no that comes with 17 explanations and offers of compromise, but the clean, final no that requires no justification. When was it? You've become so addicted to approval that the word no has practically vanished from your vocabulary, replaced by maybe, I'll try, if it's not too much trouble. You've made yourself so accommodating that you've lost all shape, all definition, all substance. But here's what you haven't realized. Power lives in the space between fear and love, in the electric tension of unpredictability. When people can't categorize you, when they can't predict your reactions, when they can't take your responses for granted, something magnetic happens. You stop being background noise and become the main event. You transform from furniture into a force, from scenery into the star of your own life. The most captivating people throughout history weren't consistently good or consistently bad. They were consistently interesting. They understood that predictability is the enemy of presence, that safety is the death of fascination, that mystery is more compelling than transparency. They knew that humans are drawn to puzzles, challenged by complexity, magnetized by what they can't quite understand or control. Think about the people who've left the deepest impression on you. Were they the ones who agreed with everything you said, who never challenged you, who made themselves completely available whenever you needed them? Or were they the ones who surprised you, who kept you guessing, who made you work for their attention and approval? The ones whose phone calls you answered immediately because you never knew what mood you'd find them in, what fascinating tangent they'd take you on, what unexpected insight they'd share. You've been playing it safe for so long that you've forgotten the intoxicating power of being unpredictable. You've become so concerned with being liked that you've made yourself impossible to find exciting. But excitement, fascination, magnetic pull, these don't come from safety. They come from the delicious uncertainty of not knowing what someone will do next, how they'll react, what they're thinking behind those eyes that seem to see more than they reveal. Fear, properly constructed, isn't about cruelty or aggression. It's about consequence. When people understand that disrespecting you will cost them something valuable, they develop a healthy respect for your boundaries. This isn't about becoming a tyrant or a bully. It's about becoming someone whose time, attention, and goodwill are finite resources that must be earned rather than assumed. You create this kind of strategic fear not through threats or intimidation, but through demonstrated willingness to withdraw your presence, your cooperation, your energy from those who take you for granted. The fear isn't of what you'll do to them. It's of what they'll lose when you're gone. It's the fear of your absence, not your anger. The fear of losing access to something valuable they've been getting for free. Think about how people treat things they can lose versus things they can't. How they handle borrowed items versus their own possessions. How they speak to someone they're trying to impress versus someone they take for granted. You've made yourself something they can't lose because you've never threatened to leave, never pulled back, never shown them what life looks like without your constant availability and unconditional support. But when you start treating your presence like the gift it is, when you begin to ration your attention like the precious resource it should be, when you demonstrate that your goodwill has limits and your patience has boundaries, everything changes. Suddenly the same people who ignored you when you were always there find you fascinating when you're selectively absent. The same people who dismissed your opinions when you offered them freely start asking what you think when your thoughts become rare commodities. This is the architecture of strategic fear, not built on hostility, but on value, on the understanding that anything available without limit becomes worthless, that anything given without condition becomes meaningless, that anyone accessible without effort becomes forgettable. But fear alone creates distance. Love, real love, not the desperate seeking of approval you've been mistaking for affection. This kind of love is earned through scarcity, value, and selective vulnerability. When you become someone worth knowing rather than someone desperate to be known, the entire quality of love you receive transforms completely. You stop collecting shallow admirers and start attracting genuine allies. You stop being loved for your compliance and start being loved for your character. You stop being someone people tolerate and become someone people choose. The difference is profound. Toleration is passive. Choice is active. Toleration asks nothing of the other person. Choice demands that they decide you're worth their investment. Real love requires that the person loving you has something to lose. If you're always available, always agreeable, always willing to bend yourself into whatever shape they need, what are they really choosing? They're not choosing you. They're choosing convenience. They're not loving your uniqueness. They're loving your usefulness. But when you become selective, when you reveal your depth in layers rather than dumping it all at once, when you make your affection something to be earned rather than something automatically given, then the people who love you begin to fear losing you, and those who fear you begin to love earning your approval. This is the sweet spot of human influence, the place where fear and love converge into something more powerful than either emotion alone. Your silence has become one of your most underutilized weapons. In a world where everyone is desperate to fill every pause, explain every decision, justify every choice, your strategic quiet becomes the most compelling sound in the room. When you stop explaining yourself, people start wondering what you're thinking. When you stop filling awkward silences, those silences become pregnant with possibility. Think about the power of an unanswered question, the magnetism of a half-finished thought, the intrigue of someone who seems to be thinking something they're not saying. You've been so eager to be understood that you've eliminated all mystery from your interactions. You've made yourself completely readable, entirely predictable, utterly transparent. But mystery creates fascination. The unknown demands exploration. When people can't quite figure you out, when there are layers they haven't yet discovered, when they sense there's more to you than meets the eye, they become invested in the excavation. You stop being someone they glance at and become someone they study. Every word you don't say becomes more valuable than 1,000 you do. Every explanation you withhold creates space for their imagination. Every time you respond with silence instead of defense, with a question instead of an answer, with presence instead of words, you remind them that you are not desperate to be understood by everyone, only worthy of being understood by those who care enough to pay attention. Your constant availability has made you worthless in the marketplace of human attention. Supply and demand govern all relationships, whether we admit it or not. When your supply is infinite, and your demand for nothing in return, your value approaches zero. You've been giving away what should be earned, providing unlimited access to what should be scarce. When you become selectively available, present when it matters, absent when it doesn't, people begin to compete for your time rather than assume they deserve it. Your calendar becomes a weapon, your attention becomes currency, your presence becomes a prize to be won rather than a given to be taken. The same people who called you at midnight with their drama suddenly find themselves carefully considering whether their issue is truly urgent enough to warrant interrupting you. Scarcity creates value. When something is rare, it becomes precious. When access is limited, it becomes coveted. You've been so afraid of being alone that you've made yourself available to everyone, which has the paradoxical effect of making you valuable to no one. But when you start protecting your time, your energy, your emotional bandwidth, when you start treating these as finite resources that must be earned rather than assumed, the entire dynamic shifts. People begin to appreciate the time you give them because they know it could be withdrawn. They begin to value your presence because they understand it's not guaranteed. They begin to treat you with respect because they recognize that disrespect leads to distance, and distance from you is now something they want to avoid. You've been playing the wrong character in the theater of your own life. You've been the background actor when you should be the lead, the supporting player when you should be the star of your own story, the extra when you should be the main event. Personal sovereignty means refusing to audition for other people's approval, refusing to perform for their validation, refusing to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. When you start acting like the protagonist of your own life rather than a secondary character in everyone else's drama, the entire dynamic shifts. You stop asking permission to take up space and start claiming the space that's rightfully yours. You stop apologizing for having needs and start expecting those needs to be considered. You stop making yourself smaller and start taking up the room you deserve. This isn't about becoming selfish or cruel. It's about recognizing that you are the author of your own story, the director of your own life, the star of your own show. Everyone else is a supporting character in your narrative, not the other way around. When you operate from this understanding, when you make decisions based on what serves your growth rather than what maintains others' comfort, when you prioritize your own becoming over everyone else's approval, people stop seeing you as an option and start recognizing you as a force. The most magnetic people are those who reveal themselves in layers, not all at once. They understand that transparency can be more boring than mystery, that questions are more intriguing than answers, that the partially hidden is more compelling than the fully exposed. You've been making the mistake of being an open book that anyone can read without effort, a puzzle that's already solved, a mystery with no mystery. When you stop telling people everything about yourself, when you stop explaining every decision and justifying every choice, when you stop being so eager to be known that you leave nothing to be discovered, you become fascinating. Your depth becomes something to be explored rather than something immediately available. People become invested in understanding you because understanding you requires effort, time, and genuine attention. Think about the difference between a shallow stream and a deep well. The stream reveals everything at once, its depth, its contents, its boundaries all visible from the surface, but the well draws you in, makes you peer into its darkness, wonder what lies in its depths, what treasures or secrets might be hidden in its mysterious waters. You've been the stream when you should have been the well. When you cultivate mystery, when you reveal yourself slowly and selectively, when you make intimacy with you feel like a privilege rather than a given, people begin to compete for access to your inner world. They begin to value the glimpses you give them into your thoughts, your feelings, your dreams. They begin to feel special when you choose to share something personal, because they understand that not everyone gets to see this side of you. Mastery lies in calibration, knowing when to inspire fear, when to evoke love, and how to ensure you're never ignored. With some people, you lead with strength and let affection follow. With others, you lead with warmth and let respect develop. But with everyone, you maintain the fundamental understanding that indifference is unacceptable. You become a student of human psychology, learning to read what each person needs to see you as significant. This isn't manipulation in the cruel sense. It's emotional intelligence applied strategically. It's understanding that different people respond to different forms of influence, that some need to see your power before they can appreciate your kindness, while others need to feel your warmth before they can respect your strength. The key is never allowing anyone to place you in the category of the forgettable. Some will fear you, some will love you, some will be intrigued by you, some will be challenged by you, but none will ignore you. You become someone who creates a response, generates an emotion, leaves an impression. You stop being neutral and start being memorable. This requires a deep understanding of human nature, an appreciation for the complexity of personality, and the wisdom to know when to reveal which aspect of yourself. You maintain your authenticity while strategically emphasizing different facets of your character, depending on what the situation requires and what the person before you needs to see in order to take you seriously. When you master the art of being simultaneously feared and loved, never ignored, you leave a different kind of mark on the world. People remember you not because you were the loudest voice in the room, but because you were the most compelling presence. Your impact isn't measured by how much space you take up, but by how much gravity you create around yourself. You become someone whose absence is felt as strongly as their presence, whose memory lingers long after they've left the room, whose influence extends far beyond their immediate reach. People find themselves thinking about things you said months after you said them, questioning assumptions they held for years because of a single conversation with you, changing their behavior because of the standard you set simply by being yourself. This is the legacy of undeniable presence, not fame, not popularity, not the shallow admiration of the masses, but the deep respect of those who matter, the genuine affection of those who know you, the lasting influence of someone who refused to be ignored, dismissed, or forgotten. You become a reference point in other people's lives, a standard by which they measure depth, authenticity, and personal power. You transform from someone who desperately seeks to be remembered into someone who cannot possibly be forgotten. Not because you demanded attention, but because you commanded it. Not because you begged for respect, but because you embodied it. Not because you asked to be loved, but because you made yourself worthy of love. This is who you are becoming, not the person who fades into the background, but the one who shapes the foreground. Not the one who gets overlooked, but the one who gets studied. Not the one who gets forgotten, but the one who gets referenced long after they're gone. The choice is yours, and the time is now.